And welcome to this edition of the Native News Update on this Wednesday, July 25th. I'm your host for today's program, Paul DeMain, and many of the stories we read here can also be found at our website at IndianCountryNews.com. And here are some of those news stories from the day from the Associated Press and other Native news sources. The Nez Perce Tribe says each of its members will receive about $8,600 as part of a settlement with the federal government over mismanagement of tribal monies and trust lands. Altogether, the BIA has sent checks to some 41 tribes, including several in the Great Lakes region that is separate from the Cobell filing and payments that will be coming in the near future. The federal government announced in April it would pay $1 billion to resolve lawsuits brought by 41 tribes attempting to reclaim money lost in mismanaged accounts and from royalties for oil, gas, grazing, timber rights on tribal lands. The Lewiston Tribune reports that the 3,500-member Nez Perce Tribe in northern Idaho received nearly $34 million under the settlement. A notice on the tribe's website said members who met a July 18th deadline to apply for the funds should receive their checks before the end of the month. Tribal members have until July 2013 to apply or risk forfeiting the settlement share. The regional tribal government in southwest Alaska is asking the governor for clemency for a group of about 40 fishermen. Myron Nang, who is the head of the Associated Village Council Presidents, told KTUU-TV that the fishermen are being treated like criminals. The fishermen were cited last month for putting their nets in the water during an emergency closure of the Kuskokwim River. Many also had their nets confiscated by state law enforcement officers. The closure was taken to protect king salmon headed for their spawning grounds, in the lowest numbers on record. Investigators from several agencies continued their search for additional evidence that they are conducting interviews in the community into the July 14th and 15th string of arson fires that burned to the ground an RV mobile home, the Big Drum Society dance hall, and several other religious sites and structures on the Lakudari Ojibwe Reservation. Being held on charges unrelated to the arson and attempted murder investigation was 37-year-old Chris Grover, a member of the LCO tribe. Grover was charged with bail jumping after missing previous court dates for the theft of a semi-truck in Washburn County, Wisconsin, and remains jailed there pending further court proceedings. 6 different sites were destroyed or damaged by the arson 2 weekends ago. Grover belonged to a local fundamentalist religious group that opposes use of traditional Anishinaabe religious beliefs. For more than 2 decades, Idaho, the Shoshone-Bannock tribe, and the federal government have tried to prevent the extinction of the Snake River sockeye salmon. Now the coalition is posed to take on what an Idaho fish and game biologist calls a real step toward recovery of the highly endangered species. The state broke ground on July 13th on the long-planned Springfield hatchery near American Falls. When finished sometime next year, the hatchery is expected to boost production of sockeye smolts from 200,000 a year to more than 1 million, with the first release of hatchery sockeye planned for 2015. The Northwest Power and Conservation Council signed off on the $13.5 million hatchery set on the north shore of American Falls Reservoir near the tiny town of Springfield. The state received funding to build the hatchery in 2008 when other northwestern states, and most of the Columbia River Treaty tribes signed agreements known as the Columbia River Fish Accords. 2 Northern California tribes are protesting a decision by state officials to postpone the relicensing process for 4 hydroelectric dams on the Klamath River. The Hupa and Resigni tribes are upset over last week's unanimous vote by the State Water Resources Control Board to put the process on hold for another year, according to the Eureka Times Standard. The tribes want the dams to undergo the Clean Water Act certification process, so their owner, Portland-based utility Pacific Corp, would be forced to remove toxic algae and make it easier for fish to travel. The initial dam license was issued 50 years ago, at which time they had no environmental laws, says Haley Hutt, a member of the Hopi Valley Tribal Council member. Brazilian police have arrested 18 people, including 6 landowners, in connection with the murder of an indigenous leader who was fighting to recover his tribe's ancestral land. A federal police chief from the Mato Grosso do Sul state told the Associated Press that arrest also included a lawyer, a public servant, and 10 men who worked for a security company. The police chief declined to reveal her name for safety reasons. The victim, Nacio Gomez, was a Guarani Kiowa leader targeted because of his fight to recover his tribe's land. Witnesses told investigators that Gomez was shot in November and his body was thrown in the back of a pickup truck. The police chief said the body still has not been found, but that the suspects face murder charges. A war shirt worn by Chief Joseph of the Nez Perce Tribe that can be seen in a painting hanging in the Smithsonian Institute sold this last Saturday for $877,500 at an auction, organizers said. Mike Overby, an organizer of the annual Coeur d'Alene Art Auction, said the shirt had sold in Reno is considered to be one of the most important Native American artifacts to ever come to auction. It had been expected to bring from $800,000 to $1.2 million at the auction, he said. Anything associated with Chief Joseph is highly desirable, and that's a pretty special shirt, he told the Associated Press. Chief Joseph wore the shirt in 1877 in the earliest known photo of him, and again while posing for a portrait by Serenius Hall in 1878. That painting, which was used for a U.S. postage stamp, hangs in the Smithsonian Institute. And that's going to be another roundup of news from Indian Country on this edition of the Native News Update. Thanks for joining with us on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays for our news update, and come back again soon. We appreciate it.